So this is one of the most interesting stories that I have come across all day. I find this fascinating. This is an article over at Newsweek that's reporting on a new poll related to the 2024 presidential election, but it's not just related to Joe Biden and Donald Trump or any of the other Republican contenders, the normal polls that we see. This poll has to do with Robert Kennedy Jr.'s approval rating and how likely voters would be to cast their ballot for him if he were to secure the Democratic nomination or if he were to run as an independent. And this is where this gets so interesting to me, because it looks from these numbers, if RFK ran as an independent, because even though he has, 20% of the Democrat vote, maybe even a little bit more than that, pulling it away from Biden, he's not going to win the Democratic nomination. Biden is going to win that. RFK Jr. is not going to win. But listen to this. This is what Newsweek writes. If the Democrats and Republicans nominate Biden and Trump, respectively, and Kennedy runs as an independent, 33% of Democrat voters would likely vote for him, according to the poll, including 14% who would be very likely to back him. So essentially what this poll is saying is RFK would be a major spoiler for Biden. He would not spoil on Biden's behalf, but he would spoil Biden's chances if he ran as a third party or an independent. And I find this fascinating because it shows an additional depth of how much voters dislike Joe Biden, because voters aren't stupid. We know that if you cast your vote for a third party candidate, just like in 2016 when some Republicans voted for Evan McMullin or whoever else ran against him as a third party candidate, this ends up spoiling for the major party candidates. So the fact that 33% of Democrat voters are so unhappy with Joe Biden, so mad that he's going to be their nominee in 2024, that they would potentially cast their vote for a man who still wouldn't win the presidency, even if he were to run as an independent, but it would spoil Biden's chances. This blows my mind. There's actually a sizable number of Republicans who would also vote for RFK Jr. if he were to run as a Republican, instead of voting for Donald Trump. This is what Newsweek says. Among likely voters as a whole, 25% say they would likely vote for Kennedy if he runs against Biden and Trump, including 14% of Republicans, with 10% saying they are very likely to cast their ballots this way. So there's a sizable chunk of both Democrats and Republicans who are dissatisfied with the idea of Biden or Trump and who would cast their ballot for a third-party candidate. Now, the difference here is 14% of Republicans, that is a pretty large number of Republicans to say that they would vote for a third-party candidate, but it's nothing compared to 33%. A third of Democrat voters, 1 out of every 3 Democrat voters would vote for RFK, which leaves me sitting here hoping that RFK will run as an independent. Please, sir, please run as an independent. Please run as a third party. Because even assuming that 14% of Republicans did choose not to vote for Trump and instead voted for RFK as an independent, you subtract 14 from 33, you still have a 20-point differential in how many Democrats have abandoned the Democrats versus how many Republicans have abandoned the Republicans. And that is far more than enough to swing the election in favor of Donald Trump. This would be the greatest thing that I've ever seen. Now, do I think this is realistic? Probably not. I think RFK has already faced, last week I believe it was, that assassination attempt. Joe Biden refuses to provide him Secret Service protection, even though he's a presidential candidate. Obviously, it's a personal. Obviously, Biden is depriving him of that security, even though his father and his uncle, one who was president, one who was attorney general and running for president, were assassinated while in office. Joe Biden has deprived RFK Jr. this Secret Service protection because he's angry and resentful that RFK is challenging him in the Democratic primary. It's so evil of Joe Biden because RFK's life is under threat. At that rally he was hosting a week or so ago, there was an assassin who showed up, pretended to be a member of RFK Jr.'s security team in order to be able to infiltrate the event. And thank goodness members of RFK's security didn't fall for this. They recognized, hey, you are not acting according to our procedures. This is a red flag. They captured him and saved RFK Jr.'s life. But this security detail, RFK Jr. is paying for, not Joe Biden. If RFK Jr. were to take it one step further, if he were not just to challenge Joe Biden in the primary, but if he were to run as a third-party candidate as an independent, I would be far more worried that assassination attempts, like the one that he's already experienced, would become more credible and more prevalent. I would be very, very worried for RFK's life. At the same time, while I don't want anything bad to happen to RFK, obviously, and I hope he has security to protect himself, I would really like him to run as a third-party candidate and as an independent, purely because I hope that he would spoil Joe Biden's chances of ever getting anywhere near the White House again. So as Gavin Newsom pretends to be a moderate by vetoing this bill that would require courts to give custody to the parent that was willing to trans their child, Gavin Newsom simultaneously is trying to penalize schools that prohibit pornographic books or sexually explicit books from being handed to children from public school libraries. This is what Gavin Newsom tweeted on September 26th. He said, California has now banned the extremist book bans the GOP are pushing. We will be fining schools that block textbooks and school library books for discriminatory reasons. Now, of course, his verbiage is a euphemism. These books that parents across the aisle, again, it's not just conservative parents, not just Republicans, parents do not want their children reading are sexually graphic books like Genderqueer that depict perverse sex acts. No one wants their first grader, second grader, and third grader having access to that book, let alone having a school librarian recommend it to them. Parents don't want their children reading a book, again, recommended by the school library that teaches that white children are racist based only on the color of their skin and not their character or their actions or their thoughts or their beliefs, and that black children are oppressed based only on their skin color and not on anything real. Parents don't want these books in school libraries, and Gavin Newsom is going to penalize. He is going to financially penalize via fines any parents who enact bans on these books being shown to their children. And I know the Democrats and the left right now have latched on to this term book ban because they think people will be really turned off by the idea of book banning. You only see that in the Soviet Union. You only see that in communist China, book bans, burning books. That's not what this is. No one is prohibiting these books from being sold. You can sell it on Amazon if you want. No one's prohibiting these books from being owned. You can keep it in your private collection if you want. But there's a difference between owning something in a private collection or publishing something and offering it for sale or giving it away for free. There's a difference between that and taxpayers buying these books that are offered in the public school system to small children. And Gavin Newsom might think we're too stupid to be able to tell the difference. He might think that this is a political fight that he can win because his public opinion polling firms and consultants tell him that people don't like the idea of book bans, how Democrats have branded this effort by parents. But parents know better. Parents understand what they don't want their children to be looking at. And Gavin Newsom is actively working against parents to show them these poisonous things, the sexually explicit material and the critical race theory propaganda against the will of mom and dad. I don't think that's going to sit well with his voters.